All right, guys, the season has come to an end, so let's go ahead and dive into my way too early college football playoff predictions for next season. All right, we are expanding to the 12-team playoff, so it's going to look a little different. This isn't necessarily, my power ranking for the top 12 teams or anything. It would have an asterisk if you're going with that because the top 4 teams are not necessarily my top 4 teams, but whoever wins the Power 4 conferences are going to be those top 4 seeds and get those buys. Whoever wins those conference championships is going to get the bye the way it's headed right now. Now, by the time I get to my way too early predictions down the line in a couple months, this may look different because at the moment they haven't adjusted just yet. They haven't adjusted how the playoff is going to work. At the moment, it's still 6 conference champions are guaranteed a spot. If not, if it was 5 conference champions, this would look a little different. For example, Liberty would be out. But at the moment, they haven't adjusted that yet. It does seem like that is on the horizon, but at the moment, that still has not happened. So before I dive into this too much, let me give you a few honorable mentions that almost made the list. All right, starting at the top. So these were my top cuts. Oregon, heading to the Big Ten next year. Got Dillon Gabriel, should be competitive, but going to have a tougher schedule. Clemson. All right, Clemson does play Georgia in the preseason. Should be probably the favorite in the ACC, and we'll get to them a little more later, but they were right on the cut line. LSU, they have a favorable schedule. I think they'll lose 2 games, probably to Ole Miss and Bama, I believe, but they should win the rest of them. Utah, all right, so Utah headed to the Big 12, got Cam Rising coming back, should be one of the favorites in the Big 12, but I think Oklahoma State's going to be a little better. Arizona, similar situation, headed to the Big 12, but Big 12 is going to be tougher. Can they survive that gauntlet? I won't say gauntlet, but I think top to bottom, they're tougher than the Pac-12 was. Louisville is my next team. All right, they kind of reload here a little bit. Got some interesting transfer portal guys coming in. Should be competitive. Appalachian State, them and Liberty play in the preseason. I think the winner of that game will be in the playoff if we stick to the 6-team format as far as 6 automatics go. If Appalachian State somehow beats Liberty, they'll be in, I think, instead. Boise State, they do play Oregon in the preseason, but bring in Malachi Nelson, got Ashton GT coming back, may lose to Oregon and still run the table. You might could sneak in with 1 loss. And then last but not least, Syracuse. All right, I know Syracuse is not the prettiest, the sexiest name, but they've got a really winnable, easy schedule next year. Bring in Fran Brown, to be determined if he's going to be a good head coach, but it is proven now that he can pull in transfers. Got some receivers coming in from Georgia. Got Kyle McCord coming in from Ohio State at quarterback. Syracuse should be a 1 or 2 loss team probably next season, actually. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into the top 12 here. As you can see, all right, the 4 teams with buys, and I'll break it down 12 through 1 here in a second. But the 4 teams with buys, Ohio State, Georgia, Oklahoma State, NC State. We'll get to those here in a little bit. Notre Dame is not eligible for a automatic bid or a bye is the word I'm looking for here. All right, they're not eligible for a bye, so that's going to obviously kind of change it a little bit. But number 12, Liberty, I think they'll be undefeated. If they are to change it to 5 automatics, I think Liberty gets knocked out, obviously. I think Memphis will get in over them because Liberty proved this year they're not really at that level. Oregon kind of pounded them in the game. But got Salter coming back at quarterback, got head coach Jamey Chadwell, which is a really good head coach. Should be a fixture as long as Jamey Chadwell's there in the college football playoff 12-team format. Number 11, Memphis. I think they'll be undefeated this year. I think they are your favorite for the group of 5 representation. They do play Florida State in the preseason. I think they'll beat Florida State. Got their quarterback coming back. Seth Henigan actually almost beat Missouri this year, which is a really good football team. Lost to Missouri by a touchdown. I think Memphis is legit. Number 10 here, Penn State. All right, I've got them at the moment losing 2 games, but those 2 losses are to Ohio State. They don't play Oregon or Michigan, so they have a really favorable schedule. The reason I have them losing to Ohio State twice, lose to them once in the regular season, and then they're probably going to play again, I think, in the Big Ten championship, which would give Penn State a second loss. But really should be a top 10 team, guaranteed almost. Like I said, you avoid Oregon, you avoid Michigan. You should win every other ball game besides Ohio State. Should get a rank win probably over West Virginia as well. But you get to avoid the pitfalls, which is Oregon and Michigan, which I think are kind of the other contenders here in the Big Ten. Number 9, Missouri. Got a really easy schedule. Have 1 loss, and what I'm predicting, that'll be to Alabama. But other than that, they have a really winnable schedule. and should be able to run the gauntlet and make the playoff. Number 8, Ole Miss, another very easy schedule, really easy. Only have one loss on what I've predicted to Georgia. So this would actually mean, even though you have two SEC teams here, Ole Miss and Missouri, they haven't seen each other in the regular season. So you actually don't get a repeat matchup in any of these games, as well as what would be the semifinals. You would have no repeat matchups, quarterfinals, I mean. Let's see. Next up, number 7, Notre Dame. I think they'll be undefeated this year. They'll be your at-large bid, or one of the at-large bids. Have a super easy schedule this next season. They had a pretty tough schedule this year. Played with Ohio State, which played with Michigan. I think Notre Dame will definitely probably go undefeated next year. Like I said, there's not really any game that I just look at and say, well, they won't win that game. Toughest team they probably play is Louisville. All right, number 6, Texas. All right, they've got Michigan in the non-conference. I think they'll win that game. Michigan is just going to lose too much, I think, at the moment from this season. So I think Texas has one loss, and that's to Georgia. And that'll put them behind Bama probably, at least in these rankings. But Texas is my number 6 seed with only one loss. Number 5, Bama have a very winnable schedule. I think they play Wisconsin in the preseason. I've got them with one loss here in the championship game to Georgia. Then when Georgia play in the regular season, as of right now, when I'm predicting, Bama will beat Georgia in the regular season because Georgia has just such a tough schedule. You've got Clemson, and then you've got at Bama, at Ole Miss, at Texas. That's 3 top 10, arguably top 5 away games. Going to be really tough. I think Bama knocks off Georgia in the regular season, then Georgia kind of gets back at them in the championship game. All right, so number 4, these are all conference champions. Again, that's why they get buys. Number 4, NC State, bringing in a ton of transfers this year. Dave Doran, really slept on coach, and one of the probably more underrated head coaches in the nation. I think NC State will be really good next year with all those transfers. Got Grayson McCall coming in from Coastal Carolina at quarterback. He's won a ton of ball games. NC State's won a ton of ball games without him at quarterback. So if you bring in a really good quarterback, I think that'll get you over the hump. I've got them with one loss. All right, but they still get the bye because they are the conference champion. They do play Tennessee in the preseason, should be a win. But I've got them losing to Clemson in the regular season and then dipping Clemson in kind of a sort of play-in game here to get into the playoff. Number 3, Oklahoma State. I think Oklahoma State does go undefeated next year, return a ton of production from their team this year. Big 12's getting weaker. You're losing Texas. You're losing Oklahoma. Oklahoma State does have a really winnable schedule looking at it. I think they can beat Utah. They avoid Arizona. And I think Oklahoma State will go undefeated. Like I said, you got Ollie Gordon coming back. You got Bowman coming back at quarterback. You might get upgrade there a little bit, but Mike Gundy, really good head coach. They did have some questionable losses this year, but I think he returned enough to kind of have that leadership to where that doesn't happen this year. I think they go undefeated. Number 2, Georgia. All right, they've got a brutal schedule. Like I said, you've got 5 probably preseason top 10 matchups that's going to be brutal. 4, not 5. And then you play Alabama, like I said, in the regular season, at Alabama, at Ole Miss, at Texas, Clemson in the preseason. I've got them with one loss here, 2 Bama in the regular season, and then avenging that loss in the SEC championship. Number 1, I have Ohio State, Big Ten champs in this prediction. I have them undefeated. This year, Ryan Day, I know he gets a lot of question marks, understandably so. They were Michigan's closest game this year. Michigan made and won the national championship. They played with Michigan with the team that had Kyle McCord at quarterback, which dropped to Syracuse. So just think about that for a second. They've upgraded in the portal. You got Will Howard coming in at quarterback from Kansas State. He's won a Big 12 championship before. You've got Quinshon Judkins coming in from Ole Miss, running back, which led the SEC in rushing this season. That combined with what you have already and what's coming back on defense, and Michigan won't be as good as they were this year. They're losing some production in Blake Corum, J.J. McCarthy, and probably Jim Harbaugh, as well as some stuff on defense. Ohio State's going to be undefeated and be the number 1 team next year. Not saying they'll necessarily win it, but they will be the number 1 seed come playoff time. This isn't necessarily, again, saying this is the order of how I would put these 12 teams if I was doing a power ranking. This is the order of how I think the playoff will finish. And looking at these matchups a little more, all right, Ole Miss starting at the top left. Ole Miss and Missouri. Like I said, they don't play in the regular season, so you get a matchup here. 2 SEC schools that haven't played each other. Pretty good game. In the bottom quarter, Alabama and Liberty. Alabama probably cakewalks Liberty, but They are the 5 seeds, so they should have the weakest opponent. Texas and Memphis actually probably be a pretty good game. I think Texas would win that one, but Memphis should be able to score some points on Texas. Notre Dame and Penn State, you get a little Rose Bowl matchup. Should be a pretty quality matchup there. Two teams that kind of play more of a pro style, aren't going to light up the scoreboard, but will be a good matchup. And then looking ahead to the quarters and the semis, you've got some pretty good matchups here. You would avoid any, looking at your quarterfinal matchups, you wouldn't have any repeat matchups. You'd have Ohio State against Ole Miss or Missouri, Alabama against NC State, Oklahoma State against Texas in a Big 12 matchup previously, and then Georgia versus Notre Dame or Penn State. This would be a pretty good playoff here. This is, again, what I think is going to happen based off of looking at everybody's schedule. These are my early, way too early predictions. Let me know your thoughts. Who do you think makes the playoff? Let me know. Who would you add to this list? Who would you take off this list? Who would you move up? Who would you move down? All that stuff. Let me know. Comment down below. Make sure to like this video and subscribe.